So if you watched at least one of my previous videos, you would have seen me displaying my cluttered apartment, and that it's that way because I have chronic fatigue syndrome, and cleaning, even just normal cleaning, like doing a few dishes, just couldn't happen on a regular basis. My apartment's still cluttered, um, but it's getting less so. And dishes don't always get done, but they're getting done more frequently, more regularly. And I'm starting to feel a lot better, and I'm getting out more, and I'm doing things, and it's really wonderful. I couldn't be more grateful to be in this place. And I got the chance to do this wonderful wellness fair, and I did readings and healings all weekend long. And it was such an amazing experience. And I'm so thrilled that I was physically able to do it. And I had the honor of being interviewed for a podcast. Whether it makes it onto the show, I don't know. But I was asked, what's my path? How did I get to where I am? How did I become, right? Um, this reader and healer and spiritual person that I am. And I hesitated for quite a while because I didn't want to talk about the role that chronic illness has played in my path. And I really do wonder if I would have gotten to where I am if I hadn't had the chronic illness. But I didn't want people to know that. And it's not like I've made a secret of it before when I was still feeling bad. And it wasn't that, okay, recognizing that I feel shame over having chronic illness is not new, right? It just was surprising how much it hit me when I was feeling well, right? When I wasn't feeling well, I felt ashamed of it, but I still would tell people because I felt like I needed to give excuses, like why I couldn't go out with them, or why I couldn't do this function, or why I couldn't do that function, or why when they ask me, oh, what did you do over the weekend? And I say, oh, well, yeah, I little crochet and a lot of nothing else. And why I was a lump on the sofa for days. And so I felt like I needed some sort of an excuse, but there still was a lot of shame attached to that. And, our society makes us feel ashamed when we can't function. It doesn't matter what our illness is. I've noticed this. And it wasn't always this way. I would say at least a decade ago, and definitely 2 decades ago, there was a lot of shame in having chronic fatigue and or fibromyalgia. Also, stigma with depression, anxiety, and those sorts of conditions. But if you had lupus or RA or MS or some of these other chronic illnesses that were degenerative and debilitating, people usually had empathy, and they didn't like blame you, like what's wrong with you, why can't you do these things? And but back in the late 90s and early 2000s, if you had chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, anxiety, it was more like, well, what's wrong with you? Oh, maybe if you just got out more, right? Or maybe if you just thought positive, you would be fine, all this other stuff, making it like it's your fault, right? It's your fault, and there's a simple fix and you just refuse to do it. But the thing is, I've noticed over the decades, right, that I see people now who have lupus, chronic Lyme's, um, you know, uh, RA, like these sorts of conditions, ones that actually show up on medical tests, ones that can actually cause physical degradation that shows up on x-rays or in blood work, that kind of a thing. And people are treating those people just as unkindly as they treat people with chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, anxiety, depression. It no longer matters, right? Whether your illness can show up on some sort of blood test or diagnostic test other than a list of symptoms or uh, answering a certain way to a bunch of questions. It, it no longer matters. If you have some sort of dysfunction, you're made to feel shame. It's like you can't carry your own weight. What good are you? You better just get over this illness now because you need to carry your own weight. Um, People, tend to disappear. It's hard to find help. It's hard to find resources. I know everybody's going through that. All these people with these sorts of conditions. And my heart goes out to all of you, and I hope that you find what you need. But I want to focus more on, again, back on us feeling shame over it, right? Because that we can do something about, right? That we can fix, that we can help. And the thing that needs to be done is first, like recognizing it, right? Feeling it, owning it, right? But then what needs to be done is inner child visualizations and shadow integration. Those two things are the things that need to happen in order for us to be free of the shame of the illness that we struggle with, right? So I want to talk a little bit about how you would do that, right? You might be thinking like, oh, all the criticism and stuff I get because of this has happened in my adult life. Or maybe you do see how it stems back to when you were a child. So you might have to go back to when you were a child and do the inner child visualizations. Or maybe you've been doing inner child visualizations on some bigger things, right? And now, like everything associated with your illness seems to happen, right, in recent years as an adult. You can still do inner child work on yourself when you were an adult. And I'm going to give you an example, right? So when I was in my 30s, I believe it was, I was in my late 30s, and I was married. We had a house. I had a full-time job. I was struggling to do it. And I was, cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, all the wife stuff, right? And I struggled. I struggled. Sometimes I'd be okay, and sometimes I would be devastatingly not okay. And it was getting rough, getting rougher and rougher. And one particular day, I needed to go to bed for the night, and it wasn't even 6 p.m. And I just told I got up from the living room and told my husband, I'm sorry, I need to go to bed. And his response was, well, if you're that bad, why don't you check yourself into a hospital? He really was not very empathetic, right, to my illness. And the thing is, nobody really was. At that point in time, when I was in my late 30s, I wasn't even getting any understanding from my doctors. So I was just pushing myself to do everything people expected me to do until I crashed. And so that was one of the moments I was crashing. And that's what my husband said to me. And it really broke me down. It was like the pressure was all too much, and to have that be said to me by anyone, regardless of who it was like the final straw. And I just completely broke down, and I was like wailing, and I ran upstairs and just like crashed in bed and just wailed for hours. And you know, his particular flavor of narcissism caused him to rush up, like apologizing like crazy and trying to love bomb me all over the place. But I didn't want any part of it because, you know, the insincerity of it just was so clear too. What he wanted was to not have to hear me in so much emotional pain. So, you know, I told him to get out, and I don't know where he slept, but we had a spare bedroom and lots of space in the living room. But, you know, he never joined me that night. And at some point, I cried myself out and did fall asleep, and I pretty sure, I don't remember exactly what the next day was, but I know I got up and I did whatever I thought I was expected to. So releasing all of that was a help, but I didn't understand at that point in time what I needed to do to go further besides getting out of that relationship. I didn't understand entirely about inner child work, and I didn't necessarily believe that it was as impactful as it is. It was probably a good 8 years later before I found my therapist, and learned how to do this properly and found out how impactful it is. So, you know, what I could do, shame doesn't mean inner child work, right? But if I still was like triggered by that experience, like I can tell you that experience and not even feel the emotion, the pain that I felt then. Like as I was telling you about wailing and stuff, like I wasn't reliving this experience. And before, when I was thinking about what to say on this video, I had a hard time coming up with an example that had to do with my illness and being shamed for it. So the inner child visualizations I've done over the past like 4 years of so much stuff, mostly with my mother, but also with other relationships, and including my marriage, right? I have done, has healed the pain of it, right? So someone could say something like that to me now and I wouldn't crumble, but I would possibly have to deal with what I'm feeling now, which is the shame of like, I don't want people to know, right, that this has been my experience. So that's the shadow integration, but I'm still going to talk about inner child. So I want to use this as an example. So if I needed to work through the pain of that experience, right, and get to a point where I no longer feel resentful to my late husband for that incident, what I started out doing is going back to that moment and being there as I am now, next to the person I was then. Because in a way, the person I was then was still a child. Even though I was like a 38, 39-year-old child, I was still in that child place. So I would start out visualizing this whole scenario, but being there from the beginning, from the moment of standing up and having to say, good night, I need to go to bed, right? And have my hand on my, right, on my back, like supporting, like, and saying, it's okay, don't worry, do what you need to do. You deserve to rest, right? And then when my husband delivered his line saying, you did not deserve that. That was awfully cruel of him to say. That is not true, and you don't need to accept that, right? And even if the me that was in the place of in that emotional child state still broke down, then I would allow myself to still isolate, right? And just be there to hug and comfort myself, right? Like imagine myself hugging me as I was crying and wailing and maybe saying a little bit, but like if you do this for yourself, you know what you would have wanted to hear, right? How it's awful that people don't see your suffering, that people don't understand your suffering, that people don't help you, right? To function better so that you're not suffering so much. And also, like, how about appreciating all the things I did do, right? And no one was showing appreciation for the things I did do, like show up at work and do my job and cook the dinner and do the dishes and everything else. And it was not like, it was like, no, you're supposed to do that. You don't need to be complimented for the things you're supposed to do. That's so awful, that attitude. Yes, you do need to be complimented for those things. And I'm here now to compliment you for all the things you did do. Now I'm complimenting you for taking care of yourself, because you know what? Good job for not letting him try to act like he was all sorry and give you love after he devastated you. Good job, right? So that visualization would need to happen multiple times before it really takes place. And I know when I first started doing that with that incident, I did have to work on that particular incident. That the first few times I did a visualization like that, I cried, but then that stopped. And then the visualization evolved, right? To not being there for myself, but the me now in that position, right? And the me now would be like, fuck you. I'm packing my bags and I'm out of here, right? And then imagining this amazing future, right? That would have happened from that point on. And, or just like going somewhere like a motel or whatever, being comfortable alone, sleeping a good night, calling out sick the next day, or just not doing anybody's dishes or cooking anybody's meal or doing anyone's laundry, you know, and maybe going for a walk and enjoying being outside and doing something for me, right? So this is like, this part of the visualization, my therapist calls interweaves. I like to call it rewriting history, right? Rewriting history is so powerful. When you rewrite the history, your emotional body starts to act like that's the way it happened, right? And that is just so healing. It's just so healing. And it's weird that doing that alone wasn't enough to take care of the shame. And maybe part of why there was still shame is because I was still living with the illness and still living with people judging me, because I would spend days, sometimes weeks, on the sofa in my apartment, unable to even go out for a short walk. I've had years of that kind of existence. And I'm not saying that it's over just because I've had a few weeks of not being in that place, and how wonderful it's been to not be in that place for a few weeks. But yeah, like when this woman asked me what was my path, I didn't want to say. I spent years as a lump of goo on my sofa. And that's how I got here. So, and that could be the topic for another video at some point in the future, how being a lump of goo on the sofa can lead to spiritual growth. But so I've described the inner child visualization. So now I want to talk about how I would approach the shadow work and how I do approach the shadow work. So the way I would do the shadow work for something like this, and you can like adjust, right, the visualizations and the concepts and everything for what works for you, right? So the way I'm doing the shadow work, and I clearly still need to do it, is to imagine that shame, right? That shame I feel for having to have been a lump of goo on the sofa, right? As like this glob outside of myself. Like I watch it come out of myself, right? This, I feel the shame. I feel it in me. It feels like tar. It feels dark. It feels icky. And I draw it all out of myself and I look at it in front of me, outside of myself. And it looks ugly, and I would like to push it away and banish it, but I don't, because inside that tar is something valuable. It's a part of me. It got like that because I had to keep pushing a piece of myself down and burying it. And when we bury stuff, it gets twisted and dark, right? And turns into things like shame. So I look at this shame and it's outside of myself. And I realize it's not its fault that it's like that. It's not my fault. I needed to bury that because it was the only thing I could do to survive at the time. But now I don't need to do that anymore. So somewhere under there is something very special, some great quality about myself that I had to bury. And I don't want to give that part up. So I have to transform this tar-like glob of shame back into what it was. So I'm going to see it in my mind, right? With my eyes closed, see it in my mind. And I'm going to send it love. I'm going to love it because it doesn't deserve to look like that. It deserves to be the beautiful thing that it was to begin with. And I send it love and I watch it transform. And even if I don't know right away what lovely characteristic was buried, right? That turned into that shame, it's okay. I'll still imagine it becoming this beautiful ball of light. And sometimes there's a lovely color to it. And today, when I do this, that color is pink. It is the beautiful, bright, but soft, inviting, warm, loving pink. And then I start to realize in this particular case, right, that the quality that was buried was self-love, right? Appreciation for myself is what I kept burying in order to survive. We work so hard to get that back. And I worked for decades to bury it, where it transformed into this black tar of shame. So I want to reclaim that self-appreciation, that self-love. So after I've sent it love and all the tar has dissolved away and it's just this beautiful pink ball of self-appreciation, right? I bring it back into myself. I invite it back in. Come on back. You're okay now, right? We're okay now. And even as I'm doing this on camera, it feels good. And I know I'm going to have to do this again, right? It takes some repetition for it to truly stick. But each time I do it, and I know this from past experience, each time I take the ball of goo, right, the tar, out of me, and I send it love, and it transmutes into something else, and I bring it back in, it makes more of an impact. It sticks with me longer. It goes deeper. I notice more, and I go deeper into understanding, right? Myself, my path, my needs, and everything that makes me who I am, right? And that it's all beautiful. Even the tar, right? Even the tar is beautiful. So I hope this has helped some of you, even if all it does is validate that when you don't feel well, you deserve to rest or do whatever it is you need to do to feel better. And no one has a right to say anything about that. So if you don't feel well, whether it's a chronic illness or not, just a little sniffles or bad allergies, not enough sleep, whatever, right? You deserve to get enough sleep. You deserve to take care of yourself. You deserve to rest. Whatever that rest looks like. No one has any right to say anything about it. So, I wish you all the best. Feel free to ask questions in the comments.